Hi, I'm Femi Oke and you're in the stream. Today, 3 centuries of union between Scotland and the United Kingdom. Are they coming to an end? We look at the Scottish nationalists' bid for independence. This is the day when we find out how many Scots are in the stream. Malika Bilal is looking out for our live feedback, not just from our Scottish viewers, but from everybody around the world. What are you seeing?
Right, well, I was just remarking to one of our producers behind the scenes that I'm seeing a lot of tweets already, and a lot of them are from the UK and Scotland in particular. Now, the overwhelming sense that I'm getting from people that are tweeting in is one of enthusiasm about this bid that was released in the white paper, long-awaited white paper, just last week. On Twitter, Big says, the white paper means the future for Scotland is in the hands of the people who can shape the kind of country we'd like to live in. Of course, this is a live discussion, and that's one person's view. We want your view. Make sure you join the conversation with the hashtag AJStream.
I'm Jeremy Morley. I'm an international family lawyer in New York. I handle international family law cases around the world, and I am in the stream.
Should Scotland be an independent country? That's the question Scottish voters will have to answer next year in the country's referendum on independence. Last week, the First Minister of Scotland, Alex Salmond, and his deputy unveiled a long-awaited white paper setting out the economic, social and democratic case for leaving the United Kingdom.
Now, the white paper sets out in detail how Scotland would become independent. It explains the choices that independence gives us. It addresses 650 reasonable questions which we've been asked, real people asking real questions. But ultimately, at the heart of this debate, there's only one question or one choice. Do we, the people who live and work in Scotland, believe that we are the best people to take the big decisions about our future?
Under the plan, Scotland would continue using the pound as its currency, the Queen would remain head of state, and the country would stay in the European Union. But the new independent nation would collect its own taxes and have its own defence force. As for its economy, it would focus on tourism, manufacturing industries and natural resources. So today we want to find out, are the people of Scotland better off going alone or staying with the UK? To help us discuss this, on the Yes to Independence side, we have Fiona Hislop. She's a Cabinet Secretary for Culture and External Affairs in the Scottish Government. Robin McAlpine is Director of the Jimmy Reid Foundation. That's a Scottish think tank and advocacy group. And on the No side, we have Neil Findlay, Scottish Labour Party member of the Scottish Parliament, and Greg Philo, he's Professor of Communications and Social Change at Glasgow University. It's great to have you all here in the stream. I'm just going to do some UK Basics 101 for our viewers who don't know the UK very well. So have a look on my laptop here. This is Northern Ireland. Pink is England. The white here is Wales. Up here in the blue is Scotland. The orange, the blue, the pink and the white, that is the United Kingdom. Now, next year, next September, if Scotland votes yes to independence, that blue will be a country all by itself and not part of the United Kingdom. So Robin, starting off our conversation, the timing for this, what do you attribute that to? 300 years of union and now Scotland is looking at perhaps an independent country. Why do you think it's happening right now?
I think it's all about what Britain's done. Between about 1945 and 1975, a Labour government in Britain ran Britain for people. It ran the country for ordinary people. Wages rose, inequality fell, things got better for people. Since then, since 1975, all that has happened is that London politics has got greedier and greedier, and it's got more and more focused in making an elite in society richer and richer, and we are now the second lowest pay economy among advanced nations, the fourth most unequal country. We've got the biggest gap between men and women's pay in the European Union. There are so many measures which show that Britain is not being run for its people. So the Scotland vote, the independence for Scotland, it's about people and a politics which is good enough for them. It's not just about flags, it's not about culture or nation, it's about politics.
So Robin, you sound like you're just fed up with the UK or the way that things are happening down in London.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard not to see London as a corrupted parliament. We've had so many scandals, we've had so many problems, but it's not even that. It's the fact that nobody believes that the Parliament of Westminster is ever going to put the interests of working people ahead of the interests of the City of London and its financiers. We're all sick of that. In Britain, there are 40% of people who say they never trust their parliament. We have the lowest level of trust of any country in Europe in its parliament, and that includes post-crash Greece. Nobody in Britain trusts its parliament. The difference is in Scotland, we've got an alternative.
Malika.
Well, Femi, you asked about timing, and it's a perfect question for our community because that's what they want to talk about. Peter on Twitter says, I personally think it's long overdue. It's time for Scotland to venture out on its own. Independence could bring about optimism. But Fiona, on the other hand, on Facebook, we got a comment about timing from someone who's a little bit more of a pessimist. This person says, me, as a born and bred Scottish-British citizen, I'm totally against the separation of the UK. The Scottish First Minister is an opportunist, taking advantage of a fragile situation. Fiona, what would you say to that?
I don't agree with that. I mean, this has been something that our party has wanted to achieve. We're now the opportunity to ask the people of Scotland. Remember, this has been agreed by both the UK government and the Scottish government. There's been agreement between the Prime Minister of the UK and our First Minister that it's appropriate to hold the referendum. We've agreed the question. It's democratic. The process is democratic. And the timing is important. I grew up in a Europe that the European Union was a few large states. Now there are 28 independent members of the European Union. So the world has changed in terms of the opportunity. I think most definitely this is a case for optimism. It's a case for hope. It's about change. And if we are going to make the most and tackle the inequalities in our lives, then this is the right time to do it. We have the resources, both natural and people, so this is the right time to do it. And actually, if we are going to make sure that we can tackle the recession and to have a better growth opportunity to share that prosperity with the people of Scotland, now is the right time to take that forward.
So Neil, I'm getting the sense of that the Scots who are in favour of independence just feel that they can just run their own countries much better than it's been run at the moment. Your thoughts?
Well, the person who tweeted in said that they were an optimist. I'm an optimist. I'm a democratic socialist. So therefore that makes me an optimist in my view. And so therefore the currency of the optimism is not just in the hands of the Yes campaign. I think we can transform our country. I think we can make massive changes. I would like us to see the further devolution of some powers, but I would also like us to see us remain within the family of the United Kingdom so that we can also work with people in solidarity across those boundaries. And because I have as much passion for improving the lives of people in Liverpool and Manchester and London as I do to improve the lives of people in my own town and my own community.
Robin, could that work? Fiona?
I mean, in principle, like I say, in 1945 there was a genuinely radical Labour government that did really strong and good things. Unfortunately, I've asked over and over, what is the vision for how we get out of this terrible low-pay society? And I'm not hearing any answers.
But you know what, Robin? But you know what? If Alex Salmond was alive in 1945, he would have argued for independence then, even when we had the most radical UK government ever. So the argument that this is just about changing from austerity or whatever is nonsense.
It's not about the past, it's about the future. It's actually about my children. It's about how we can shape that future. And
so Fiona, I'm just going to pause you for a moment because we see you a little frozen, but I know Greg wants to jump in, and Fiona, we'll come back to you so you can finish making your point. Sorry about the technology. Greg, go ahead.
Okay, let me take up some of those points. I mean, it's true that there was a very good left-wing Labour government in 1945 to 51, and they brought in wonderful things like the NHS. But in 1955, over half the population of Scotland voted Conservative. They actually voted against. They voted the Tories in. Now, that seems to be, the point is that people vote in different ways. You can't, if you don't like how the people vote, you can't just say, well, we'll have another country and have another electorate. We'll just elect another electorate. So what we get, So you can't just say we want to change a government or change a whole state each time you get a government that you don't want. That's what democracy is. I mean, when the Labour Party was in power, presumably the Tories, some of whom were in Scotland, some in England, they didn't like it. And when, for example, Wilson, one of the prime ministers, brought in capital gains tax, I mean, the Tories hated that. But you don't have people saying, well, we're going to break off the south of England because we don't like what the government's doing. It's not sensible to say you have to elect another electorate each time you don't like a government. And of course I agree with Robin that there are appalling things that have been done by the current government, dreadful things, but most of the population of Britain didn't vote for them. Cameron only got in with 36%, and now he's in power, and he's kept in power by the Liberal Democrats. A lot of those are Scottish. My local MP in Scotland is a Liberal Democrat. She trots down and votes with Cameron. But you have to put up with democracy. What are you supposed to do? You can't say, well, each time it goes wrong, we'll have another country.
But not each time. When there's permanent failure, surely democracy enables people to take a chance. And wouldn't you accept that a large part of the problem here is London? The politics of London are corrupt. And so what can we do with our democracy?
Accept that. No, I absolutely don't accept that. I think London is a city. It's full of deprived, people who are having all kinds of problems. Over half of the population of London rent. I mean, half of the black young people in London are unemployed. I mean, I don't think it's right for us in Scotland to say, oh, well, OK, what we'll do is we'll just, we're actually OK because we've got a possibility of prosperity. We've got oil. So we take the oil, we draw a line from Carlisle to Berwick, and then everybody above that is OK, and then we just leave the rest. Gentlemen, I don't think that's acceptable.
Gentlemen, I'm going to
I don't think it's right. It's not socialist. It's just an oil grab, and I don't see that that's acceptable. The whole Scottish nationalist thing, since I've been here, which is like over 40 years, really took off when the oil was discovered. So you've got all these slogans saying, it's Scotland's oil. And it doesn't play well. It doesn't look like much more than selfishness.
All right, Greg, take a pause, because I'm going to put some more people of my community into this conversation.
I think that's right. But
Greg,
why
take
is
a pause.
Any better?
Greg Philo, he's a professor of communications. Yeah, I know why he's a professor right now, right, of communication. Greg, take a pause for a moment, because we have to get our online community into the conversation as well. We love what you're saying, but we also want to add some extra voices.
Exactly, and Femi, just as Greg was saying, you were mentioning democracy. Our community picked up on that, and they said, yes, it is about democracy, but they don't feel that London represents them. They're on Facebook. We got this comment from someone who says, we are ruled by an English government who only really cares about London and the south of England. And Neil, I want to bring you in here. We got this video comment. Have a listen and let me know your thoughts.
Hi, I'll be voting yes in the referendum next September. The reason why I'll be doing this is because I believe that independence will give us a government that not only that we vote for, but will be more responsive to meeting the priorities of the people who actually live here in Scotland. At the moment we live in a UK where we don't get the government we vote for. Independence will give us a government which can meet our priorities and deliver the kind of policies that we wish to see implemented here in Scotland.
So Neil, he says he wants a government that's more responsive to the people in Scotland. What do you say to that?
Well, that's up to the government of the day. The Scottish government at the moment could be more responsive to the people of Scotland, and I don't think they are. And I've got a whole range of criticisms that I could make of the current Scottish government. So, I just don't get that argument. There's some image being portrayed that somehow just because we're independent that means we'll have a more progressive society. That is absolute nonsense. Some of the policies that are being promoted in the white paper are things like a cut to corporation tax, a massive gift to the biggest corporations. How is that progressive? How are things like the sterling zone policy, that's giving away power rather than taking power? How is that progressive? And a whole range of other policies. Scottish Government have cut funding for colleges in Scotland. How is that progressive? There's a whole range of issues. Now, the assumption that some people make is just because you're independent, it's a progressive choice. I say it is not a progressive choice, and that the progressive choice is to have further devolved power and to work in solidarity with people across the United Kingdom, where there's actually a transfer of resources from areas of to areas of most need. I think that's a good way to operate.
Neil, there are many countries that have become independent in the last number of years and decades. I think if you asked any one of them, would they actually want to go back to being dependent on a union that they were previously in? I think the answer is no. And in terms of democracy, currently we've got more pandas in Scotland than we currently have conservative.
That's an old one, Fiona. It's wearing thin.
Well, people might, but in terms of people's understanding of what that means, 26 out of the last 40 years, we've had governments in Scotland that we didn't vote for at Westminster. They've taken us into illegal wars, and they've pursued policies that we don't agree with. But actually, in terms of building a new nation, building a new state, it is about forward-looking. I remember Greg. Greg was one of my lecturers at university many years ago. And hello, Greg. And hello. In terms of and what I think is important about this debate is people will have different viewpoints, and I think that's fantastic. The spotlight is currently on Scotland, and I think in terms of our arguments, I think all of us will be able to project the type of Scotland that we want. But it is about, if you were to have a democracy in the northwest corner of Europe, what would it look like? We'll work backwards and inside what type of Scotland and what type of constitutional arrangements that would make. I've made up my mind, but a lot of people have still to make up their mind, and that's what's exciting about this debate that will take place from now until September.
See, this argument about you get a government that you don't vote for, could you maybe explain that a bit further, Fiona? Because I don't think that, for example, in 2007, we voted for an SNP government.
Well, in terms of the electoral system, we got elected in 2007. It was a minority government. We had to rely on other parties.
But the same argument applies. It's the same argument.
Oh, but Neil, hold on a second.
I suppose. Come on, that's 2011. The Scottish government got voted in a proportional representation with a majority. I think that's a strong indication that people want to come on that journey with us in terms of what we're trying to do currently under devolution.
Okay, so Fiona, Neil, and Robin, I'm just going to call time on this part of the conversation because we're running out of time, and I don't want to get too domestic and navel gazing for our international audience. But I do want to know practicalities. How do you unstitch a country that's been part of the United Kingdom for 300 years? How does that work, Robin? What's the plan?
Exactly.
Do we have him? Did I stump him? I don't think that's possible. Fiona, no, Robin is never lost for words. Fiona.
Sorry, I got cut off
Robin's there. Robin's there, I think.
All right, Robin, are you back with us?
Hi.
Yes.
Yes, I am.
How do you unstitch a country after it's been part of a union for 300 years? How's that going to work out?
How's it going to work out to rebuild the country? It's the most amazing opportunity that anybody could possibly have. The chance to rebuild a country is really what I'm in this for. It's the chance to build something new, which is the thing that we haven't been able to do. And we haven't been able to change systems which are failing. We haven't been able to make fundamental changes in our economy, in our institutions. This is what we want.
Well, Femi also asked about practicalities, and Robin, I heard what you said, and I want to bring you in here, back in here, Fiona, with this tweet from Paul, who says it's time we stopped having governments forced upon us that we didn't vote for, and it's time we had control of our finances. So speaking of finances, Ineboli tweets, how independent will Scotland be when they still plan on using the pound as their currency? Tough days await them in the Eurozone. How is that possible?
Well, currently we have a share of UK assets. You may not be aware the Bank of England was actually founded by a Scot, and in terms of that we also have a share of the pound as well. Perhaps to give a picture of this in terms of our wealth, currently Scotland is probably about 8.4% of the UK population. We currently pay in terms of taxes 9.9% of the revenue, and we get about 9.4% of public spending back. So we more than pay our own way. We have something like 25% of Europe's offshore renewable wind and tidal opportunities. So great opportunities for us.
So Greg, Fiona used to be one of your students. So what is she not seeing perhaps in the way that Scotland might develop if it went independent? What's the downside as far as you're concerned?
I didn't teach on this, but what I would say is that the essential problem with the present government is that it's not really doing anything for the benefit of anyone in Britain. It's not just Scotland. It's essentially a government which puts making of money before the needs of the people, and I think it's doing all kinds of terrible, dreadful policies. But I mean, leaving that aside, the question is that we need a planned economy, not a market-based money-making all the time economy. We need to plan jobs, we need to plan reskilling, we need to rebuild the whole of Britain. But the money, the great source of engine of investment and wealth in the country as a whole is actually in the southeast, in that golden triangle in the southeast. And you need to force that out, not just to Scotland, but to Yorkshire, to Humberside, to Teesside, to South Wales, all of those areas. And so we need a collective restructuring of Britain to rebuild it so that you can move investment to where it's required. And if Scotland cuts itself off from that, I think it would suffer very badly, because I think you would lose the potential for that regional investment. I don't think that we would get the investment here in green energy. I think a lot of the existing regional policies, all of the government departments and things that are located up here, like DFID or Centre One for tax, we'd lose all of that. I actually think it would be incredibly damaging for the Scottish economy, but most of all, we'd lose the chance for solidarity with all of the people in the rest of the UK who actually need to work together to get a much better, much more progressive Britain. And I think we can work together to do that. I really do.
Greg, that's a dependency way of thinking. And of course, Scotland isn't a region, it's a nation. And if we want rebalancing between the economic drag of London, well, what better way than to have a counterbalance?
Some people think it's a nation. I think it's actually become part of the UK for 300 years. And I mean, of course, it's an important area, and I've lived here for 40 years, and I think of myself as from here. But I also know that there are very, very many other people in Britain who do not feel represented by that parliament. Absolutely. You go to Yorkshire, to Humberside, Teesside, South Wales, all of those areas, Kent, lots and lots of places who people
but
feel
Scotland has a chance. Scotland has a chance to build.
Most people did not vote for it.
All right, so you're listening to the debate. Everybody who's in the stream right now, have a look on my computer. This is the first poll since that white paper document was unveiled last week. And so far, 27% of people since that white paper says yes, that they would like an independent Scotland. 56% say no. Now, you know, polls are polls. We all know how reliable polls may or may not be. But Fiona, what's your feeling about where we are in Scotland right now? What are people saying to you?
People are saying to us that some of them are very fixed on yes or no. There's a large number in the middle that are yet to make up their mind. I think, interestingly, some of the no's are, if you ask them what they would do tomorrow, would say no, but they are open to persuasion and they want to be convinced. Now, a lot of people have been saying in recent weeks and months, we want information. And the big difference in the last week is we've managed to produce one of the most comprehensive guides to a new nation I think that's ever been produced pre-independence, 670 pages.
Okay. I want to ask Neil that same question, so just wind up there for now. We'll come back to you in the post-show. Neil, what is your feeling on the ground? So far we're looking at, according to this poll, 56% of people are not interested in being separate from the UK. What's your take, just very quickly?
Well, last week we would have expected there to be some bounce in the polls following the launch of the white paper, but it's had all the bounce of a lump of lead. If we look at the polls at the moment, they're actually fairly steady. One of the leading pollsters in Scotland, Professor John Curtis, has actually said that the polls on independence have hardly moved for the last 30 years. Because they sit almost steady at the same numbers. So I think people in Scotland are very, very pragmatic and will take a pragmatic decision on this. If the polls are anything to go by, not a lot is changing.
All right, that's Neil Findlay. He's a Labour MP for the Scottish Parliament. You will hear more from him in the post show, and you'll hear more from Fiona Hislop from the Scottish Government. She's a Cabinet Minister. Robin McAlpine will be back with us, as will Greg Philo as well. Where is our community leaving us at the end of this main show?
I'm going to leave us with a tease for the post show. This is a tweet from the UK. Stephanie says, there's a sense of nonchalance in England over this independence, probably because most people don't think it will happen. We'll debate that soon.
And if you want to keep up with a Scottish debate at Al Jazeera, you can do online at aljazeera.com. You go to In Depth, you go to Spotlight, and there you will find Scotland Decides 2014 with all of our reporting on Scotland online. On the next AJ stream, anti-government protests that spread through Bangkok for the past week have died down just in time for the King of Thailand's birthday. But with the opposition leader vowing to continue after the celebrations, what lies ahead for the deeply divided Thailand? We'll be talking about that and a whole lot more in the next AJ stream. But right now, we're heading online to the post show at stream.aljazeera.com. Thanks for watching. See you there. Hello again, this is the Streams Online Post Show. We've been talking about the possibility of Scottish independence. Our guests, Fiona Hislop, Cabinet Secretary for Culture and External Affairs in the Scottish Government. Robin McAlpine is Director of the Jimmy Reid Foundation, that's a Scottish think tank and advocacy group. Neil Findlay is a Scottish Labour Party MP, and Greg Philo is Professor of Communications and Social Change at Glasgow University. And as we found out in the live show, he used to be Fiona Hislop's professor. Excellent, like that, like a less than 6 degrees of separation. We're going to start this part of the conversation with the community. Where are they taking us?
Well, I want to give us two different views of what people seem to be saying. This one is from Kirsten Hahn, who is in Scotland now. She tweets in, I can't vote, so I mostly try to observe, but I find the prospect of being able to change the system quite exciting. And that's a view shared by many people tweeting in. But we also got this message from Stephanie, which I read at the end of the main show, and she said there's a sense of nonchalance in England over the Scottish independence, probably because most people don't think it will happen. So Fiona, I want to go to you for this because, of course, we've been hearing what people in Scotland think. On the other side, people don't think it will happen. How do you counter that? And is there a reason that they should think it might?
Well, in terms of what can happen, quite clearly we could have a yes vote. There are different polls. One very recently had us the yes vote only 9% behind, so a 4.5% swing would move that. But I think none of us should take this for granted. I think it's all to play for. Indeed, the Scottish Secretary of State was, I understand, informing the UK Cabinet that really should not assume that somehow this wasn't going to happen, because quite clearly the momentum that can change things, the fact that we've now launched the guide, the 670-page handbook and guide for the white paper in terms of explaining how we can become independent, what we can do with independence, can obviously change things. And I think it's all to play for. So I think it's an unwise politician that assumes anything and can't take anything for granted. But I think what's interesting is people want to talk about this. I've been involved in politics a long, long time, and talking to people about the independence issue is quite different than asking them to vote for a government or asking them to be part of other elections. So I think that's the democracy argument, to me, is one of the most exciting things. And what Scotland could look like and the type of policies we can have. Would we be a Nordic style country? What kind of policies would we pursue? I think it's very exciting indeed.
So Fiona, what do your English friends make of your position right now? Do you feel you might lose friends over this? Is there a sense of us versus them, perhaps?
Oh, well, listen, I was brought up in England. In my formative years, I went to school in England. I had a lovely English accent until I moved to Scotland. And the social union between friends and family, that won't change. We'll still see the same broadcasting, the same television programmes. We'll also have a defence union in terms of our membership as well, of some of the defence organisations. The monarchy would stay under the proposals that we've set out in the white paper. Some people would have different views about that, but the union that would change, the only union we're looking to change, is the political union, and that's the one that gives the democratic power back to the people of Scotland.
Sure,
could I
ask
Fiona something?
Yeah,
Fiona, why do you want the central bank of a foreign country to run the currency? Why would you want to do that?
Well, if you remember, Gordon Brown, one of the first things he did when he became Chancellor in 1997 was to give independence to the Bank of England. And obviously in terms of the currency union, we set up a fiscal commission. It has two Nobel Prize winning economists on that commission. They say that quite clearly the UK is a maximum currency area in terms of the economics and the proposals. So quite clearly we can.
But do you agree? Do you agree that
it's not a far?
Do you agree that that's do you agree that operating under the current sterling zone proposal, with no politicians representing you at the Westminster level, is actually giving power away?
No, what power do we have just now? Neil, what power do we have just now?
You've got influence over regulation and all the rest of it. You're going to have none of that. You're going to have none of that.
One MP in Scotland. That's the democratic argument.
But you've got political representatives in that parliament. You will have none in the Westminster Parliament, and yet you're going to hand over the currency. It is absolute bonkers.
Yeah, we would share the currency zone. That's the argument.
I want to bring Greg in here to pick up on something that Fiona said earlier, that, you know, you're not taking it for granted. Greg, online people, you know, or they're hearing the heated arguments on our show right now, but they say on the ground, it's a little bit different. Alan tweets in, there's a serious lack of an alternative paper from the Better Together campaign people, and we need answers from them too. Are the Better Together campaign people taking it for granted?
Well, I'm not in that campaign. I just give my advice as best I can. But what I would say is that I think people up here probably don't believe it's going to happen as well. I mean, if you look at the polls, it is just about 25% consistently who are saying yes. I think the rest are either saying no or don't know. And the problem is that it isn't very clear. It isn't a very certain future at all. It looks very, to my mind, looks very dodgy. So what we're saying in effect to the people is, look, we're standing at the top of a cliff. We're going to jump off, and it's really good at the bottom, but we don't actually know quite how far down it is. Now, in a situation like that, the don't knows will turn to no, and I actually think that there will be a big no vote. But I mean, just perhaps I'm sticking my neck out here, but my view is that the SNP and the people pushing for it, they're not silly. They're very clever people, and they must know that. They must, in their heart, know that. I know they can't say it publicly, and I wouldn't expect Fiona to say it, but they must know that. And when I look,
Greg, I know it. Greg, I know otherwise.
Let me just say, when I looked at at that white paper, I thought, is this really a future for Scotland as a nation, or is it actually a kind of positioning paper for greater powers? Because when you look at it, it's you keep the Bank of England,
this is just garbage.
We keep a
silly.
whole range of things. You know,
Greg, let me help you out here. Greg, you've thrown the grenade, okay?
Like
so you've thrown the grenade. Let's just hear what the damage has been. Greg, so we've heard you, and then Robin's popped back in. Thank you for rejoining us, Robin.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, but your timing's perfect. I hear some pushback. Greg?
Well, I mean...
Sorry?
Yeah, Robin, go ahead, sorry.
Sorry. No, what I was going to say, and very sorry about this, I've had to go to somewhere where there's no lights to get internet access. What I want to say to Greg is that I am horrified by what he says here. There are thousands and thousands of campaigners out there in Scotland. Almost all of them are social progressives who want to build a better country. We are trying our best in the face of a right-wing media and the London establishment to try and set out a vision for a Scotland which is good for its people and not just good for its bankers. If we get a chance to get that story across with a realistic tale, not a fantasy like you two seem to be pushing, a fantasy that somehow London's going to reform itself. London is not going to reform itself. If anything, the things that I disagree with the Scottish Government about, and there are some, are nothing in comparison to what I disagree with David Cameron about, and nothing compared to what I disagree with Tony Blair about. What hope is there in a no? What chance is there in a no? Scotland is going to be consigned to further decay and further decline as the City of London dominates our national economy, and if we don't take a chance to do something different, that's our future. I am absolutely of the view, and I know this because I'm doing a lot of canvassing. I know that the people who are going to vote yes are the poorer people in Scotland. The richer you are, the more you're likely to vote no.
Absolutely.
And the poorer you are, the more you're likely to vote. Absolutely. Neil, I'm sorry, I 100% guarantee you I've got the polling.
Well, how can that be?
Can I come in?
25%.
Yes,
add up
absolutely.
to the figures. I mean, there is a very rich group in Scotland. 500 people own half of it. I mean,
Fiona,
I'll
make space for you 1 minute.
Has a particularly good chance of being progressive by itself. Not in that way.
Greg,
I think those people would spend a lot of
innovative?
money making sure they stayed in power or influenced power. But I mean, that's another argument altogether. But the point is, if you don't like
okay, gentlemen, you're speaking in stereo. I can't hear both of you at the same time. So, Greg, finish your sentence.
Develop a new country each time you don't like a government.
All right, end of sentence there. Fiona, I know you've been trying to get in. Here's your space.
Can I go in as well?
You can, but let's hear Fiona first.
Look, this is a choice of two futures. Some of the things with independence will be certain, some of the things will be uncertain. But that could be said the same of the current UK government. And I think that what will happen over the next period is people will have to look at those two futures and think about what best options will suit them. And there are certainties and uncertainties with both of them.
So Fiona, let me just ask you about this, because you were reacting, I could hear your reaction when Greg was basically accusing your party of politicking. It's a win-win situation for you. You either get an independent Scotland or you're pushing for more power? What's your reaction to that?
We want to see an independent Scotland, because if we really want to change Scotland, if we really want to be a country in the community of nations, if we want to make sure our internationalism can be articulated in the way that I think Scotland wants it, we have to be an independent nation. I go as a government minister to the European Union, and I have to sit behind the UK government when we're making discussions about education or health, things that we have responsibility of just now. I want to be sitting at the same seat, equal with other nations, to be part of that community of nations. That is something that we've been wanting to see happen for many, many years. And people have been wanting independence long before the points that Greg was saying. But I think he's a bit of a merchant of doom and disaster. And quite frankly, in terms of where we want to go in the future, I think we have to approach a can-do attitude.
Right.
This idea of dependency on London has held us back too long. It's time for Scotland to flourish.
All right, so I promised Neil that he could jump in. Neil, go ahead. Go ahead.
Some of this stuff that Robin's coming away with is not based in the real world. To try and argue that suddenly the power of global capital, partly based in the City of London, will somehow disappear and lose its stranglehold over the country, over Scotland, it's just absolute nonsense.
But we can fight back. Fight back.
No, I'll tell you how you can fight back. You can fight back with progressive forces across the United Kingdom.
We don't have progressive forces.
Yes,
across
of course we do. We have the trade union movement. We have progressive forces.
What policies
across the UK?
What policies can I vote
across
for?
the UK, working together. All the progressive advances that we've had over. Wait a minute, Robin. Wait a minute. You've had to say. The fact that you just shout louder doesn't mean your argument's stronger. The progressive developments we've had over the centuries: universal education, the National Health Service, the minimum wage, trade union reforms, they've come because progressive movements across the United Kingdom have argued for them. If we suddenly become... Well, Robin, any chance of having a word in, please? And the way in which that has happened is because those forces have worked together. If you dilute those forces and you only have a Scottish trade union movement, Scottish organisations, we are weaker in the face of global capital rather than having the ability to stand up to it. And the policies of the Scottish Government, where they actually want to reduce corporation tax and end up with a race to the bottom on corporate taxes across the United Kingdom, will be a disaster for working people in Scotland. And how you can support that is beyond me.
Right. Okay, so Neil, Fiona, Greg, Robin, I'm calling time on this conversation, which I know is going to be going on until September the 15th, is it? 2014? 18th, thank you. September the 18th. I know you have that date stamped on your brain. If I ask you for one sentence, can you do it? Guess one sentence? It's got to be one sentence. It can't start a debate off again. It's September the 19th, 2014. If you had a prediction to make, what would it be, Greg?
This is all, I think, a terrible distraction. We need to get back to real politics. We need to have solidarity across the UK against an appalling government, and we can do that.
All right,
But
Neil,
that's
take me
what we
to September the 19th, 2014 in Scotland.
September the 19th, I hope Scotland has voted no, but that is a no for change, and that change will come via a Labour government at Westminster, as Labour always does, delivers on its devolution plans, further powers to the Scottish Parliament, and retaining our links to the UK so we can have progressive government and progressive change in Scotland, but also across the United Kingdom.
Fiona, your one sentence prediction for September the 19th of next year.
Well, as External Affairs Minister, I look forward to meeting all our friends and colleagues internationally to build those direct relations and all those relations with people across the globe. That's what I'm looking forward to on September the 19th, working with people as an independent country.
Very confident. Robin?
We have to have a fighting chance of making Scotland a better place. There is no chance of that under a Westminster government. We have to take the powers to try and build a better Scotland, and I think we will.
Thank you, guests, for bringing that Scottish independence debate to the stream. We enjoyed listening to all of the discussions. Where were you going to leave us, Malika? Community has the last word.
A little optimism and a little pessimism. Paul on Twitter says it's becoming more likely every day, referencing independence. Every time more facts are given to people, someone decides to vote yes. But he's cautioned by Leon on Twitter, who says, if Scotland wants independence, let them have it. But don't blame the UK if it goes wrong.
Now, moving on to our next show. Anti-government protests that spread through Bangkok for the past week have died down just in time for the King of Thailand's birthday. But with the opposition leader vowing to continue after the celebrations, what lies ahead for the deeply divided Thailand? We'll discuss that and a lot more on the next programme. And as always, we'll be in the stream online. Thanks for watching. Take care.